You were never supposed to find me. Evelyn Carter's voice was barely more than a whisper, but after 5 years of silence, Adrian Blackwood would have recognized it anywhere. He stood at the edge of the hidden cottage, rain darkening the shoulders of his charcoal coat, staring at the woman he had spent half a decade trying to forget and never once succeeded. The forest around them was quiet, the kind of quiet that made every breath feel louder than it should. 5 years ago, Evelyn had disappeared without a word. No farewell. No letter. No explanation. One day she had been beside him, and the next, she was simply gone. Adrian had searched every town, every road, every place where someone might hide from the world, but eventually even a king had to accept that some doors would never open again. Until today. He had been traveling through the northern countryside when his driver mentioned an old cottage hidden nearly 2 miles beyond the main road. Adrian had not expected anything. He certainly had not expected to see a familiar blue ribbon tied around the wooden gate. Evelyn used to wear that same shade in her hair when they were younger. He had followed the narrow trail through the trees, past wildflowers and tall grass, until the cottage appeared between the pines. It was small, warm, and painfully ordinary. Nothing like the grand halls where he had spent the last 5 years carrying responsibilities that had once seemed more important than anything else. Then the door opened. Evelyn stood there with one hand resting against the frame. She looked older, not in years, but in the quiet way people change after carrying a secret for too long. Her hair was longer. Her face was softer. Yet her eyes were exactly the same. Adrian could not speak. For the first time in years, the man everyone knew as the Alpha King had no command ready, no answer, no carefully chosen words. Evelyn, he finally said. Her expression tightened. You need to leave. He stared at her. After 5 years, that is all you have to say. She lowered her eyes for a moment, as if fighting a memory she had spent years burying. I told myself you would never find me. I looked for you, Adrian said quietly. I know. Those 2 words struck harder than any accusation could have. She knew. She had known he was searching. She had known he was waiting. And still, she had stayed hidden. Adrian took one step closer, but stopped when he saw the hesitation in her eyes. Why did you leave? He asked. Evelyn looked toward the cottage, then back at him. Because staying would have changed everything. Before Adrian could ask what she meant, a small sound came from inside the house. A child's laughter, soft and innocent, floated through the open doorway. Evelyn froze. Adrian's eyes shifted toward the cottage. Then slowly, his gaze returned to her face. For the first time that day, fear appeared in Evelyn's eyes. And Adrian realized the 5 years between them had been hiding far more than a broken goodbye. The child's laughter faded into the quiet of the cottage, leaving Adrian standing beneath the covered porch with a question he had carried for 5 years. Evelyn remained in the doorway, one hand still gripping the edge of the frame, her face calm only because she had spent years learning how to hide what she felt. Adrian looked past her into the warm room beyond. A small pair of boots rested beside the fireplace. A wooden toy horse sat on a rug near the window. There were crayons scattered across a little table, along with a half-finished drawing taped to the wall. It was an ordinary home, but every detail seemed to tell him that Evelyn had built an entire life without him. Who is here? He asked. Evelyn did not answer. Evelyn. Her name came out softer this time. Please. She closed her eyes briefly. 5 years ago, she would have turned toward him without hesitation. She would have trusted his voice, his promises, the future they had once imagined together. Now there was a careful distance between them, measured not in feet, but in years. You should not be here, she said. I know. Then go. Adrian looked at her, and for a moment something in his expression changed. He was no longer the man who had arrived expecting an explanation. He was simply a man standing in the rain, facing the person he had never stopped missing. I cannot do that, he said. Evelyn swallowed. Why? Because I spent 5 years wondering whether I had done something wrong. Her eyes lifted to his. You did. The words were quiet, but they carried years of pain. Adrian did not defend himself. Tell me. Evelyn looked toward the fireplace. The room beyond the door seemed suddenly much smaller, as though every memory she had protected was closing in around her. You were becoming the Alpha King, she said. Everything around you was changing. The council. The expectations. The people who wanted something from you. Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. He remembered those years. Endless meetings. Long nights. Decisions made for a kingdom that seemed to grow heavier every day. But he had never understood why Evelyn had disappeared in the middle of it. You could have told me. I tried. Her voice cracked for the first time. More than once. Adrian stared at her. Then why did I never hear you? Evelyn gave a sad little smile. Because I was afraid you would choose the crown. Before he could answer, footsteps sounded from deeper inside the cottage. Evelyn turned immediately. A small boy appeared at the end of the hallway, holding a wooden horse in both hands. He had dark brown hair, bright gray eyes, and a thoughtful expression that seemed far too serious for a child his age. He looked at Evelyn first. Then he noticed the stranger standing outside. Mama? He asked. Evelyn's entire expression softened. It is all right, Noah. Adrian went still. The boy looked at him with open curiosity. Who is he? Evelyn did not speak. Adrian felt something inside him shift as he studied the child's face. There was something familiar in those eyes. Something he could not explain. Noah stepped closer, still holding the wooden horse. Are you the man from the picture? Adrian's breath caught. Evelyn turned pale. 5 years of silence had suddenly become a single question. And Adrian knew, before Evelyn said another word, that the life she had hidden in this cottage was connected to him in a way he had never imagined. Are you the man Mama waited for? Noah asked, his small voice filling the cottage with a question that seemed far too heavy for a 4-year-old. Adrian could not answer. He stood beneath the porch, rain tapping softly against the roof, while Evelyn remained beside the doorway with her hands clasped tightly in front of her. The silence between them had changed. It was no longer the silence of two people who had lost each other. It was the silence of a truth finally standing in the room with them. Noah looked from Adrian to his mother, waiting patiently. Mama? Evelyn lowered herself beside him. Go back to your room for a minute, sweetheart. But I want to know. I know. She brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. Just give me a minute. Noah looked at Adrian again. There was no fear in his face, only curiosity. Then he nodded and disappeared down the hallway, his small footsteps fading across the wooden floor. Adrian watched him go. His name is Noah, he said quietly. Evelyn nodded. How old? She hesitated. 4. Adrian closed his eyes for a moment. 4 years. The number settled between them with unbearable weight. He remembered the last time he had seen Evelyn. He remembered the plans they had made, the promises they had whispered when they believed their future belonged to them. He remembered waking the next morning and discovering she was gone. You were pregnant, he said. Evelyn looked away. Yes. Adrian's voice became softer. With my child. Evelyn did not deny it. That was all the answer he needed. He stepped back, not from anger, but from the sudden realization that 5 years of questions had just been answered in a single moment. Why did you keep him from me? Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, but she refused to let them fall. Because I believed I was protecting him. Adrian looked toward the hallway where Noah had disappeared. From me? From everything around you. She drew a slow breath. You were becoming the Alpha King. People were watching every decision you made. Every person close to you became part of a larger game. Adrian remembered the council meetings, the pressure, the constant expectations. But there was one part of her explanation he could not accept. You should have trusted me. Evelyn finally looked at him. I wanted to. Her voice was barely audible. More than anything, I wanted to tell you. I wrote letters. Dozens of them. I told you where I was. I told you about Noah. I told you everything. Adrian stared at her. Then why did I never receive them? Evelyn's expression changed. It was the first time Adrian saw something deeper than sadness in her eyes. There was fear, but not fear of him. Fear of the past returning. She walked to a small wooden cabinet near the fireplace and opened the bottom drawer. From beneath a folded blanket, she pulled out a weathered box tied with faded blue ribbon. She placed it on the table between them. Adrian looked at the box. What is that? Everything I could never send. His eyes remained fixed on the ribbon. Evelyn slowly untied it. Inside were letters, carefully folded and dated across 5 years. Adrian reached for the first one, but before he could open it, Evelyn whispered, if you read them, you will finally understand why I left. Outside, the rain continued against the roof. Inside, Adrian held the first letter in his hands, unaware that the words written 5 years ago would change everything he believed about the woman who had disappeared. Adrian stared at the weathered box as though it contained the missing years of his life. For a moment, he could hear nothing except the steady rain against the cottage windows and the faint crackle of the fire behind him. Evelyn stood several feet away, watching him with the guarded expression of someone who had waited too long for a moment she had never believed would come. Adrian lifted the first letter carefully. The paper had softened at the edges, and the date at the top was nearly 5 years old. His eyes moved across the first lines, and his expression slowly changed. I did not know where else to go, the letter began. I knew you would search for me, but I was afraid that if you found me, you would bring me back before I could protect what mattered most. Adrian stopped reading. He looked at Evelyn. You wrote this the night you left. She nodded. Yes. He looked down again. The next lines described the weeks before her disappearance. Evelyn had noticed that several members of the royal council were asking questions about their future, about the succession, and about the possibility of a child. At first, she had dismissed it as political curiosity. Then she began receiving anonymous warnings that made her realize someone knew about her pregnancy. She had become frightened, not for herself, but for the child she had not yet told Adrian about. Why did you not come to me? Adrian asked. I tried, she said. But every time I came close, someone was already watching. Adrian slowly placed the letter on the table. Evelyn reached for another. There were people around you that I could not trust. I did not know who was loyal to you and who was loyal to the crown. Adrian looked toward the window. He remembered those days differently. He had believed Evelyn was becoming distant. He had blamed the growing pressure of royal life. He had never imagined she was carrying a secret that frightened her enough to disappear. Evelyn handed him a second letter. Read that one. He unfolded it. This letter had been written 2 months after she left. In it, she described the small apartment where she had first stayed, the fear of being recognized, and the first time she heard Noah's heartbeat during a doctor's visit. Adrian's eyes stopped on one sentence. He already has your stubbornness. A quiet breath escaped him. For the first time, the years between them felt painfully real. Noah had grown from a tiny heartbeat into a little boy who laughed beside a fireplace and asked questions about the man in an old photograph. Adrian looked at Evelyn. You kept all of these. Every one. Why? She looked toward the fire. Because writing to you was the only way I could still speak to you. The answer left him silent. Adrian had spent 5 years believing Evelyn had chosen a life without him. Now he understood that she had been carrying his memory through every one of those years. He picked up another letter, but Evelyn gently stopped him. "There is one more thing you need to know." Adrian looked at her. "What?" Her eyes moved toward the hallway where Noah was quietly listening. "The reason I truly stayed hidden was not the council." She paused, her voice trembling. "It was because I discovered who had been looking for us." Adrian did not move. Evelyn's words seemed to settle over the cottage like a sudden winter chill. "Who?" he asked. She looked toward the hallway, making sure Noah was no longer listening. Then she closed the door gently and returned to the table. "A group of people who believed your future should belong to them." Adrian's expression hardened, but his voice remained calm. "Tell me what you discovered." Evelyn took a slow breath. 3 weeks before I left, I found a document in the royal archives. It was not supposed to be there. It described a plan to change the order of succession if you ever had a child before the council approved your marriage. Adrian looked down at the letters. "Our child." "Yes." Evelyn folded her hands together. The document called the child a political risk. It suggested that if the heir were born outside an approved royal union, the council could remove the child from the succession and place the kingdom under temporary rule. Adrian felt the weight of those words. He had spent years believing the council had only been concerned with tradition. He had never imagined they had discussed his future family in such cold terms. "Who wrote it?" he asked. Evelyn shook her head. "I never found the original signature. Only copies. And you thought they would come after Noah." "I knew they would." Her voice became softer. "I had already heard people asking where I was spending my evenings. Someone had followed me home from the clinic. I realized they were watching everything." Adrian looked toward the hallway again. "You were alone." "I was not completely alone." Evelyn gave a faint smile. "A woman named Grace helped me leave the city. She knew a quiet place near these mountains. I came here because nobody expected an Alpha King's future heir to be raised in a cottage 2 miles beyond a dirt road." Adrian walked slowly toward the window. Outside, the rain had begun to weaken, leaving droplets shining on the dark leaves. "You could have told me." "I was afraid." "Of me?" Evelyn shook her head. "Of what your position would force you to do." Adrian turned back. "You thought I would choose the kingdom over my own child." Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. "I thought you would be given a choice and never realize someone else had made it for you." The words stayed between them. Adrian finally understood why her disappearance had never made sense. She had not been trying to punish him. She had been trying to keep Noah outside a world where every decision could become a political calculation. "Why come here alone?" he asked. "Why not tell anyone?" Evelyn looked down at the old letters. "Because I promised Noah he would grow up knowing that his life belonged to him. Not to a title. Not to a council. Not even to a king." Adrian lowered his eyes. For the first time, he saw the years from her perspective. He had spent 5 years searching for the woman he loved. She had spent those same 5 years protecting the life they had created. Then a quiet voice came from the hallway. "Mama?" Noah appeared again, rubbing his eyes. Evelyn smiled. "Yes, sweetheart." Noah looked at Adrian. "Are you staying for dinner?" Adrian glanced at Evelyn. She seemed surprised by the question. Then Noah added, "You look like the man in Mama's picture." Adrian felt his chest tighten. He knelt so they were at the same height. "I think I am that man." Noah studied him carefully, then smiled. "Good. I wanted to meet you." Evelyn looked away, her eyes shining. And in that small cottage, after 5 years of silence, Adrian realized something even more important than discovering he had a son. He had finally been given a chance to earn back the trust he had lost. Adrian stayed for dinner. It was the simplest decision he had made in years, yet somehow it felt more important than every decision he had ever made inside the royal council chamber. Evelyn prepared soup and warm bread while Noah sat at the small wooden table, watching Adrian with the open curiosity only a child could have. Adrian had eaten at grand tables covered with silver and crystal, surrounded by advisors and formal conversation, but nothing had ever felt as strangely meaningful as sitting in a quiet cottage with a 4-year-old boy asking him questions about his life. "Do you live in a castle?" Noah asked. Adrian smiled. "I do." "Is it bigger than this house?" "Much bigger." Noah thought for a moment. "Then why did you come here?" Adrian looked toward Evelyn. "Because I needed to find someone." Noah nodded as though that answer made perfect sense. "Mama?" Adrian's smile faded slightly. "Yes." Evelyn placed a bowl in front of Noah and quietly sat across from Adrian. She had expected tension, questions, perhaps even anger. Instead, Adrian seemed strangely calm. He did not demand answers. He did not tell her what she should have done. He simply listened as Noah explained his favorite stories, the vegetables he refused to eat, and the little wooden horse he carried everywhere. Every few minutes, Adrian glanced at Evelyn, and each time she looked away. After dinner, Noah became sleepy and asked Evelyn to read him a story. Adrian remained at the table while the cottage grew quiet. Through the open doorway, he could hear Evelyn's gentle voice reading from an old book. Adrian looked down at the weathered letters still resting beside him. 5 years of words she had never sent. 5 years of questions he had never been able to answer. Then Evelyn returned and sat across from him. "He likes you," she said. Adrian looked toward the hallway. "I like him too." She smiled faintly. "You barely know him." "Then I would like to know him." Evelyn lowered her eyes. "Adrian, this cannot become complicated." "It already is." She looked up. "I am not asking you to return with me." Her expression changed. "You are not." "No," Adrian leaned back slightly. "You spent 5 years believing I would come here and demand that you become part of my world again. I understand why you were afraid." Evelyn was silent. "But I do not want to take your choice away." She studied him carefully. "What do you want, then?" Adrian looked toward the hallway where Noah had disappeared. "A chance to be his father." Evelyn's eyes filled with emotion. "And what about me?" she asked. Adrian took a slow breath. "A chance to know you again." The cottage fell quiet. Evelyn looked at the man sitting across from her and saw something she had not expected to find after 5 years. Not the Alpha King. Not the powerful figure she had once feared the world would claim. Just Adrian. The man who had once held her hand beneath the summer stars and promised that she would never have to face anything alone. "I cannot promise you anything," she said. "I am not asking for a promise." He stood and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he turned back. "Tomorrow, I will return." Evelyn watched him step into the cool evening air. "Why?" she called softly. Adrian looked over his shoulder. "Because Noah asked me to stay for dinner." A small smile appeared on his face. "And because, for the first time in 5 years, I know where home is." The next morning, Adrian returned before the sun had fully cleared the mountains. Evelyn heard the quiet sound of tires on the gravel path and looked through the kitchen window. For a moment, she wondered if she had imagined everything from the night before. Then she saw him step out of the car carrying a paper bag in one hand and a small wooden box in the other. Noah ran to the front door before she could stop him. "You came back." Adrian smiled as he crouched beside him. "I said I would." Noah looked inside the paper bag and immediately smiled when he saw the cinnamon rolls. "Mama makes breakfast. Then I brought something for later." Evelyn watched from the kitchen, unable to hide the small smile that appeared on her face. It was strange seeing Adrian here. Stranger still was seeing Noah accept him so naturally. Yet beneath the warmth of the morning, Evelyn knew there was something Adrian still had to do. He could not simply stay in the mountains forever. He was still the Alpha King, and the people who had once watched her were still connected to his world. After breakfast, Adrian stepped outside and made a phone call. His voice was quiet, but his expression became serious as he listened. "I need the old council records," he said. "All correspondence concerning succession from 5 years ago. Nothing summarized. I want the originals." He ended the call and stood beneath the tall pine trees, staring toward the mountains. Evelyn joined him. "You are going back. For a short time. You do not have to investigate everything." Adrian turned toward her. "I do." She looked down. "Why?" "Because you spent 5 years believing you had to protect Noah alone. If there was a reason you were afraid to come home, I need to understand it." Evelyn was quiet. Adrian continued, "Not because I want to force you back. Because I want to make sure you never have to disappear again." Those words stayed with her long after he left. That afternoon, Adrian returned to the capital. The palace looked exactly as he remembered it, but something about it felt different. He entered the royal archive and found the records he had requested waiting on a long oak table. The first documents appeared ordinary. Meetings. Succession discussions. Formal correspondence. Then he found a memorandum dated 3 weeks before Evelyn disappeared. His eyes moved slowly across the page. It mentioned an unborn heir. It mentioned Evelyn by name. And beside her name was a sentence that made Adrian stop reading. "The matter must remain outside the king's knowledge until the appropriate arrangements have been completed." Adrian read it again. Then again. Someone had deliberately decided that he should not know about his own child. He turned the page and found another document, signed by a senior council secretary. The name belonged to someone Adrian had trusted for years. His expression changed, not with anger, but with a quiet understanding. Evelyn had been right. Someone inside the royal circle had known about Noah before Adrian ever did. And for 5 years, that secret had remained buried. Adrian closed the file and looked toward the tall windows of the archive. Outside, the palace flags moved gently in the afternoon wind. He had returned to the place where his reign had begun, but now he understood that becoming a king had cost him something he had never realized he was losing. He had lost 5 years with his son because people around him believed they had the right to decide his family's future. Adrian picked up the file and walked toward the council chamber. This time, he would not ask what they thought he deserved to know. He would ask what they had hidden from him, and why. Adrian entered the council chamber just before sunset, carrying the old archive file beneath one arm. The room was exactly as he remembered it, with polished oak walls, tall windows, and a long table where decisions had shaped his reign for years. Several council members were already seated, expecting another routine discussion. None of them expected Adrian to place a 5-year-old document in the center of the table. "I want an explanation," he said. No one answered immediately. Adrian opened the file and turned the first page toward them. "This memorandum mentions an unborn heir and a woman named Evelyn Carter. It also states that I was not supposed to know." The room became completely still. One of the senior advisors, Charles Whitmore, adjusted his glasses. "Your Majesty, there may be context you are missing." Adrian looked directly at him. "Then give me the context." Charles hesitated. Adrian had known him for nearly a decade. He had trusted his judgment during difficult years, relied on his advice, and believed he understood the difference between duty and ambition. Now Adrian noticed something he had never noticed before. Charles would not meet his eyes. 5 years ago, Charles finally said, the council believed the kingdom needed stability. "Stability," Adrian repeated. "Is that what you called hiding my child from me?" Charles looked down at the document. We believed Evelyn would eventually leave. Adrian's voice remained controlled. You knew she was pregnant. We suspected. And you did nothing. Charles took a breath. We believed her presence would create complications. Adrian closed the file. She was not a complication. She was the woman I loved. The words settled over the chamber. No one interrupted. Adrian continued, you did not protect my kingdom. You interfered with my family. Charles tried to explain that the council had been acting according to tradition, but Adrian no longer listened to excuses built around old rules. The documents were enough. The truth was simple. Evelyn had not abandoned him. She had been pushed into believing that disappearing was the only way to protect her child. Adrian stood and gathered the papers. From this moment forward, no council member will make personal decisions on behalf of my family. Without my knowledge. He left the chamber before anyone could respond. That evening, instead of remaining at the palace, Adrian drove back toward the mountains. The journey took several hours, and darkness had settled over the road by the time the cottage lights appeared between the trees. Evelyn was standing outside when he arrived. She looked at him and immediately understood that something had changed. What happened? She asked. Adrian walked toward her, but stopped several feet away. You were right. Evelyn lowered her eyes. About what? They knew. Her face became still. They knew about Noah. They knew you were afraid. And they decided you should disappear instead of giving me the truth. Evelyn closed her eyes. For 5 years, she had carried that knowledge alone. Now she did not have to explain it anymore. Adrian reached into his coat and removed a small wooden box. He opened it and revealed the ring she had once left behind. I found this in the archive records. Evelyn stared at it. I thought you lost it. I kept it. He placed the box on the porch railing. But I am not here to ask you to wear it. She looked at him. Then why bring it? Adrian smiled gently. Because I finally understand that loving you does not mean deciding your future for you. The words reached her slowly. What do you want? She asked. Adrian looked toward the warm cottage, then toward the dark forest beyond it. A place in your life, if you will give me one. For the first time, Evelyn did not look afraid. She simply reached for the box and held it close. Behind them, the cottage door opened, and Noah called Adrian's name. Adrian turned toward the sound. Evelyn watched him go, and something inside her finally began to believe that perhaps the future did not have to look like the past. The next morning, sunlight poured through the cottage windows, turning the wooden floor a warm golden color. Noah was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of oatmeal and asking Evelyn whether Adrian was coming back again. Evelyn smiled as she poured him a glass of milk. I think he is. Noah looked pleased. Good. A few minutes later, the familiar sound of a car moving along the gravel road reached the cottage. Adrian stepped through the door carrying groceries, fresh bread, and a small package wrapped in brown paper. Noah ran toward him with the same easy excitement he had shown the day before. You came back. Adrian crouched beside him. I told you I would. Evelyn watched from the kitchen, and for the first time, the sight did not frighten her. The days that followed were simple in a way none of them expected. Adrian stayed at the cottage whenever his responsibilities allowed. He learned how Noah liked his pancakes, which stories made him laugh, and why the wooden horse was his favorite toy. Noah slowly stopped asking whether Adrian was staying for dinner and began assuming he would. Evelyn noticed the change too. Adrian never demanded that she return to the palace. He never told her that she owed him the years they had lost. Instead, he listened. He helped repair the old fence. He carried firewood into the cottage. He sat beside Noah while the boy colored pictures at the kitchen table. Sometimes Adrian and Evelyn spoke late into the evening about the years they had spent apart. There were difficult conversations, but there was also honesty. One evening, Evelyn walked outside and found Adrian sitting on the porch steps, looking toward the mountains. She sat beside him. "You could still ask me to come back," she said. Adrian looked at her. "I could. But you will not." "No," she smiled softly. "Why?" Adrian watched the last light fade beyond the trees. "Because 5 years ago, I thought being your king meant I had to decide what was best for you. Now I understand that being the man you love means letting you decide for yourself." Evelyn was quiet. She reached into her pocket and touched the small wooden box he had given her. "I was afraid that if I returned, I would disappear again." Adrian shook his head. "Then we will not return to the old life." She looked at him. "What does that mean?" "It means this cottage can remain your home. It means Noah can grow up knowing both worlds without belonging entirely to either one. It means you can visit the palace when you want, leave when you want, and never again feel that you need permission to choose your own life." Evelyn looked toward the kitchen window. Noah was laughing at something on the table. For 5 years, she had believed she had to choose between loving Adrian and protecting her freedom. Now she realized she did not have to choose. Adrian had changed too. He had returned from the palace not as a king demanding his family back, but as a man willing to earn his place in their lives. Months later, the cottage became a home shared between two worlds. Adrian still carried the responsibilities of the kingdom, but whenever he could, he returned to the mountains. Noah grew older surrounded by both the quiet of the forest and the warmth of his father's presence. Evelyn kept the little wooden box on a shelf beside the fireplace. Inside was the ring she had once left behind, no longer a symbol of a life she had lost, but a reminder of a choice she could finally make freely. One evening, as the three of them stood outside watching the sunset, Noah reached for both their hands. Evelyn looked at Adrian. Adrian looked back at her. Neither needed to say anything. 5 years ago, Evelyn had believed disappearing was the only way to protect the life she loved. 5 years later, she understood something she had never dared to believe. Home was not a palace. It was not a title. It was not a place someone else chose for her. Home was the place where she could remain herself, and still be loved. And that evening, beneath the quiet mountain sky, Evelyn finally chose to stay.